Okay, so we'll start with the second session. Thank you, Rodolfo Orozco Galvez, for being here. He will share with us land cover and vegetation map, and then Gordon McCord. Once again, thank you, Gordon. Will make a comment, and then it will be open for questions and comments. Please, Rodolfo, yours is the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. This is my first time at UCSD, so I'm amazed for the facilities you have here. Congratulations. I hope all my colleagues coming from Mexico and are able to use and to make the best use of these possibilities once you're in a region that is completely connected. And I know that you know that is the way. So regions is maybe the future in analyzing data also. And I would like to ask you to please forgive me because of the subject I am about to talk because I know you are in policies and some kind of other subjects, so I will try to keep your attention, and I'm pretty sure I can do it by starting saying that every single data we take from the land or from any other kind of statistics happens in a point on the territory. So geography comes back once again as one of the main subjects that we have to take into account to know what is going on in every place on Earth. Saying that, yes, for sure, I will talk about vegetation map, which is one of our products in INEGI, but I would like you to go through a brief journey with me so we can figure out why we have to study geography or the phenomena that happens on every single part of the land. So our aim is to show INEGI's land cover and vegetation mapping for sure, but I would like you to go deep into what this means, the complexity of mapping the natural resources in general, and for sure as well as the vegetation mapping. And we will talk a little bit also about the methodological processes, data sources, and for sure the inclusion of satellite images and field measurements and sampling. So through this presentation, I will cover all these topics, brief context and introduction, then the thematic mapping in which land use and vegetation is one of them, including the herbal collection we have also at INEGI, and the future, a little bit what we are doing by using artificial intelligence as other techniques in going forward in making the best effort to have best products. So please take this brief minute to check how we got up to here. If we all accept that there was in sometime somewhere a big bang, then what happened from there to now? I'm pretty sure you may understand every single frame what is telling about how we got up to here. How was this? There was this big bang. In that big bang, scientists said there were only two elements, hydrogen and helium. And every pass of the eras, those elements became heavier, so they finally got up to the more than 100 elements we now know on land, on Earth. And here we are. All that expression of the big forces of the nature made what we now know as the Earth. So it's 4,500 million years of cycling processes. And I will stop a little bit here because I want to emphasize something. And this is something I just read a couple of weeks or 3 weeks ago. Scientists are now talking about the laws of nature. And as you may know, one of the most known laws of nature is evolution. But once Darwin set this law, we all remain fixed on that evolution is only biological processes. That's not true. And this is what new scientists are saying. No, everything is evolving. Everything is changing. The complete universe has evolved from one single big bang, one explosion, up to what now we know. But if we assume that the evolution or the change has stopped, we are wrong. Everything continues changing, even the rocks. But the terms of timing, which those small elements evolve, are longer than what happens with biological expressions or life. But I would like you to keep this concept. Everything is changing. Everything is evolving. And every single change, as in the case of biological processes, becomes from the interaction of several different elements in different cycles, and then they produce a lot of possible combinations. Only remain those that are the most useful for what the world, or if they have a meaning for something to be built on it or with it. So this is the way we have, as I said, evolved from the elements to become molecules and then to combine together to form cells, and in the last term, organisms. On the right side of the image, you have also a silhouette with a man, which is, of course, for sure, also composed of elements. And I will now stop again on this and say, this is something that I criticize the most. Most of the times that we as human race study nature and natural phenomena, there is this tendency to take us out of the equation and say, okay, this is anthropic production, but we are watching the media or the ecosystem from which we are also coming out or we belong to. So this is something I would like you also to take care of. You are making policies or about to be doing so for the different countries. Do not take the human out of the equation, because it is part of the problem, but also part of the solution, but becomes or came out from the same system called ecosystem. So once again, what happened through the last 550 million years in just 40 seconds? Well, what we now know as the continents became, started by as Rodinia, then Pannotia, Pangea. I already saw a Pangea drive over here when I arrived. So, and then to Gondwana, Laurasia. And this shape what we now know as continents. And those extraordinary forces in the tectonic plates that have made the territory to become as we now know, and it is the source of what we, in the case of Mexico, have as a very, very shape and different land with altitudes going up to 4,000 meters above sea level, and with deserts and tropical forests and so on. So this is part of what we have to face as the complexity. From one side, that geology is taking that role to shape the land as we now know, but also there is the water, and we can approach to the water interactions through the also well-known cycle of water. And water, as you know, goes mainly up from the body, water bodies, including the ocean, and to evaporation forms the clouds, and then the rain is also shaping again the territory with the rivers and all the creeks and everything that goes. So the water goes down up to the sea at the end, but in its way, it forms lakes, it forms lagoons, it forms rivers, and the water also goes down deeper into the air, into the land, so we can recharge the groundwater sites. Those elements, the altitude, but also the latitude. Latitude meaning where we are located on the Earth, depending from the equator to the northern side or the southern part of the globe. That also determines the type of climate we will have. So we have now the altitude, which means how high we are above sea level, the latitude, how to the north or to the south from the equator we are located, and also the water that we have, which in fact also impacts on the type of vegetation and so on. Everything is in a cycle. So we also study in this area the climates and how those factors become together. And all those factors also produce the soil, what we know as the producer layer of the land, which is the top part of the land. And it is produced also for the interactions of water, climate, and same plants. So we can have what we now know as soil. There are some studies that say that in order for you to have 1 millimeter of soil, you will need at least 100 years of time. So this is the rate in which we mainly produce this, also a natural asset. And all together form what we can study through this tool, which is the Aldrich triangle. And depending on the humidity of the provinces, the precipitation, and the evapotranspiration ratio, you can also find different types of ecosystems. So you can have from the rainforest on the bluer corner to the super arid regions, and they are located in the same place, but depends on how much water we evapotranspirate in that zone or how much rain we receive. And something that Dr. Marquez already talked about, and those are the ecosystem services. Okay, we now know that depending on how or where we are located in the Earth, we will have one or other type of ecosystem, but those ecosystems also provide different types of services. In a summary, we have supporting system services, provisioning services, regulating, and cultural services as a whole. And all of it is subject to change. Everything is changing in a different rate, but everything is changing. I don't like to expect to have the origin of the plants that were originally in the territory of what now known as Mexico, because I don't know where to stop if I want to analyze that past. So given this complexity, what we now have is almost 2 million square kilometers of Mexico, and we are trying to study lots of the natural resources that we have on this planet, on this country. And as it happens in every kind of statistic studies, we are subject to pressures because every time we need more spatial detail, more frequency, recent reference data, final products, high-grade accuracy, more intensity observations during analysis period. And that is why we are in a need to be capable of manage, process, analyze big data, and going from imagery to an effective way. So we are dealing with all of it. Now, if we go into what we now do as thematic mapping, and I for sure will talk about land use and vegetation, but we, as I mentioned, have to do with geology. What do we do in geology? Well, we study mines, other geological locations, the different type of rocks, igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, also fossils. So we have a big and nice collection of them. But these last, the faults and fractures, this is very important for us. Why? because as you know, we are in a seismic zone in Mexico, most of the country. And you also here in California, in this part of Southern California, because of the fault of San Andres. And well, but this is big faults. What happens in the big cities is that also because due to the over-extraction of water from the groundwater, we are suffering small faults that give us problems in terms of fractures in buildings, in houses, or some places that you cannot even use concrete in the street because due to these faults that every now and then they fall again and change the difference in the concrete side of the street. So this is something that we have also started to study across the big cities of Mexico. In hydrology, we try to use some models. In this case, we are using the software INVEST, Integrated Valuation of Ecosystem Services and Trade-offs, to simulate what is going on with the running water in a basin level maps, trying to figure out how will the water will move, how will concentrate in some zones, and for sure, how they will recharge the groundwater. The left part of the image shows several different inputs that we use to get up to the modeling outcome. And on the other side, we also have to check how is that water, the raining water, impacting the erosion of the soil. So we also have to know what is going on in that zones. Are we losing soil? Are we losing the possibility to have more more plants? In the case of the climate, we approach through the use of syndromes, the so-called syndromes, which are clusters of environmental problems caused by human activities and can be identified by looking trends in global change. As in this case, we can show in that image the forest overexploitation syndrome, which is, as you can see, located in the two biggest states, forest states, Chihuahua and Durango. So we have also to set this kind of information so another institution, in this case Comisión Nacional Forestal, National Forestry Commission, can make use of this and support or not support the establishment of plantations of trees. Some climate products, on the left side you have the Extreme Index project, which has a consecutive dry days from 61 to 90, and it can show you a picture of how the climate is happening in Mexico. Then we study also the soils, as I said, and we go to the field, take samples, but also analyze them through laboratory testing. And finally, this is one of the best maps, or the most known and used maps, which is the Land Use and Vegetation Information Classification System. We call it in Spanish, Carta de Uso del Suelo y Vegetación, because we are trying to say, okay, what are we using the soil, the land, for? That is why in the same map we have for sure the types of vegetation, but also agricultural zones, also settled across the country. And all the previous data, the weather, the geology, the soils, the location, the altitude, and also the human activities impact on what we now find as vegetation types across the country. In general, the data that this map contains is organized in three big groups. The ecological information, which is in which we focus the most, and agricultural information and additional information. And up to today, we have produced 7 different maps or series of vegetation. The last one of them with a base year of 2018, just published last couple of years ago. And it is produced digitally and in a scale of 1 to 250,000. What does that mean? Well, that every millimeter in the map means 250,000 millimeters in reality. Is that good or bad? Enough or not? Well, for a country like Mexico, it is a challenge to do it that way, but I have to accept that if I use this chart, this map, to check state level, maybe it will only be useful to check Chihuahua and Durango due to the size of the states. So we're now dealing to go with a better scale, so it is useful. Second challenge we have, okay, in Mexico, as let you know that this map of vegetation started to be produced before the INEGI just born. So it is the base of some other maps, geographic maps of Mexico. And the way we started studying the vegetation has to do with the condition also, as the Dr. Marquez said. We try to know where is that kind of ecosystem located, but also what is the condition of that, let's say, that forest. Is it in primary condition or secondary one? And if it is on secondary condition, it still has trees, shrubs, or just herbs. And you can get there and say, okay, this is supposed to be a forest of pine, a pine forest, but there is no pine. However, from the ecological point of view, what we decide is, okay, this should be a pine forest without trees, but it is still a pine forest. So if something has to make or implement a new policy, has to do with restore that forest. Because we already said that there are conditions to come back into a forest. Then, in Mexico, we have 58 different vegetation types. And you have to multiply that number times the different conditions. So we map more than 200 different vegetation types. And due to this collaboration with the United States and Canada, we also participate in the North American Land Cover Change Monitoring System. So we have to go from the 58 original types of vegetation through only 15. Because in the North American land cover map, there are only 19 categories. 4 of them impossible to have in Mexico as the tundra. So we have to translate those 58 into 15. But still, we can be sure that there is complementation in the information of vegetation through the subcontinental level. So, well, some terms, but I will not bore you with this. Natural vegetation is that covers naturally in a region. Secondary is that grows after something, the original vegetation has been removed. And the induced vegetation is that is introduced into the ecosystem. We have, for sure, all the methodological process. We start by checking previous maps and then going to check in the field if we still have that condition or not, and then come back until we have the logical consistency control. But this is another thing that is very interesting. Due to that process of going and coming from land to the field, we now have this herbal collection and database of them. And up to now, we have 60,000 records. We have found 6 new species that haven't been reported before. We have a sample on more than 22,000 sites, and we are starting the digitalization of the specimen. And we have more than 8,000 already done and in high definition. So researchers across the world are able to check the files in digital, so they don't have the need to move to Aguascalientes. This is the way we herborize every single specimen, and we then scan all of them, so every one of them has a record with all the information that it is needed. Why do these serve to us? Well, very easy. If we come back to the same zones in different moments and we find some specimens that we couldn't find before that could also help us to know what is changing, once again, in territory, what is changing due to the climate change or due to the man activities. But we are now finding species that are more, let's say, tropical into bigger altitudes, higher altitudes in the territory. But we have not stopped there and started already to use the new technologies and new tools as artificial intelligence. And we started with this. Geoscience Australia published and free liberated the technology to make what we know as geospatial data cube. It is a data cube, yes, as in the case of big data statistics, but the difference is that one of the layers, one of the dimensions of the cube are images, satellite images. And these satellite images are, first of all, we made this tiling, 144 tiles to contain all the Mexico territory. And every tile dimensions 150 kilometers by side. And in every tile, we set the images of, in this case, Landsat. We started with Landsat satellites, being sure that every single pixel is located one above the other of the same zone. So this way, we can analyze the data as per pixel. That means we have more than 25 millions of pixels for the entire country, but covered with several images or several times per year, 26 to 30 times per year. That means a complete mosaic of the territory every month, let's say. So we work with it, but on the pixel level, and this is what it is more important. We already have images coming from 1982 up to today, and we have more than 139,000 images. For sure, there are already satellites that doesn't work anymore, but there are some others coming. This makes us be sure that we will still continue to have information. The point is, where will we locate that information? That's big data. Also big needs of saving data. Some products that are already published in INEGI and ready to be used is the geomedian, the WOFS, which means water observation from space, and the NDVI. The NDVI is a very, very useful index that we in vegetation mapping use a lot because it allows us to know what kind of reflectance we have on the plants due to the condition of the plant, if it is stressed or if it is growing or if it is on, in this case, as today in autumn. So it's losing the leaves, but before that they change the reflectance of the light. So we can check all of it. In the case of the geomedian, it is a complete image of the territory with a synthesized image of it in which every single pixel was analyzed to take off all those pixels that had or cloud or shadow of the cloud, so we can have the best from the image, the best of every pixel through the year. We select that one, we make the median, and put it together in this product. So the works that we are currently doing to map the vegetation by using these new techniques get us to this example. This is just an example. And as I mentioned, we've been producing the scale 1 to 250,000. our goal now is to go deeper in this scale and produce a land use and vegetation scale 1 to 50,000, which means 5 times more detail. And how are we dealing with it? Well, this is what now we have achieved in some parts. This is the Chapala Lake in Mexico. The right side of the image is the current land use and vegetation, the most new, the newest, Series 7. And the left side are the first results of the model. Check the detail that we are able to obtain by analyzing images pixel by pixel. And now figure out how much computer power we need to do so. Well, nowadays, and money, for sure, because it is not any computer. I would like to finish in summary. As I mentioned at the origin, everything is changing. The change is complex to understand. We've been studying the phenomena by splitting the phenomena, mainly from Descartes, from Descartes, the philosopher. So cause and effect, once at a time. And maybe the help of the computers and the artificial intelligence, what is helping us to do is to get all together once again. We already studied by separated phenomena. Let's make the effort of get all combined again, all that we have studied and learned, every single part of it. So the complexity will still be there, but there are every time more tools that help us deal with it. And at the end, the last part is continuity. I'm pretty sure that we have to continue. Both of us, I mean, one of us making our job by giving best data, some of you making us be better every time you need more data. But at the end, I hope that we can make it as humanity. Thank you.
No, yes, better. Okay. At the risk of repeating myself this morning, impressive, INEGI, always. Delighted to see where your innovations are and how you're leaning forward into things. I think just to set the stage, I'll take a step back from the specifics at the beginning of what was presented and maybe just say, at least from the point of view of public policy, why this matters and why it's important to be mapping land cover, vegetation cover, taking herbal samples from across the country. Who cares unless you're an ecologist? Well, maybe we should flesh that out just to show how important this work is. Every human challenge is a geospatial challenge. Everything we do is spatial, whether you care about security and crime, whether you care about poverty reduction, whether you care about infrastructure and transportation, whether you care about climate change. Everything is a spatial problem. It exists in a place or a point, as Rodolfo said. And land is the quintessentially fixed resource on the planet. And we ask a lot of our land. And using land for one thing means not using it for something else. So that sets us up for a lot of tough challenges as societies and decisions that we need to make because we ask a lot of our land. We want our land to be productive for us, producing food, livestock products, forestry products. We want our land to be environmentally rich for ecosystem services, for the existence values of biodiversity, environmental regulation, everything we want. We want our land to decarbonize. If 30% of greenhouse gas emissions globally come from land use and land use change. Most of the time, we're talking about decarbonizing our energy systems and decarbonizing our transportation systems, and that's really hard and really important because that's 70% of the global emissions. But rarely or insufficiently are we thinking about the challenge of the remaining 30% of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from how we use our land and how we change our land cover. And we don't pay enough attention to that. So as you think about the challenge of how to use this fixed resource that countries have, land, well, this is a really hard challenge. And I'll talk a little bit about a project that's trying to do that and just how fundamentally it depends on data like several of the data products that were mentioned just a second ago. Under the UNFCCC, so the Paris Agreement, every country in the world has to submit its nationally determined contribution plan, which is how is the country planning over a short term and over a long term to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions as part of the world's commitment to that. No country in the world, none, pays enough attention to the land use component in the NDC. Neither rich countries nor developing countries focus on the fact that, as I said, 30, in the US it's maybe 20% of emissions, in other countries it's higher than 30, but globally it's about 30% of emissions are coming from our land and land use change. And our NDCs don't cover that. We focus, as I said, on transportation and energy systems. But they say something, and what you're gonna do with your land, whether you're promising that you're gonna reforest hundreds of thousands of hectares of land, or you're gonna change your forest management to improve carbon sequestration, or you're gonna change how you do agriculture, like low-till agriculture to increase the soil sequestration in the agricultural sector, you're somehow gonna reduce the nitrogen oxide emissions from livestock or methane emissions from livestock and fertilizer. All those things are kind of qualitative paragraphs at the end of the average NDC. They're not very serious. And they have huge implications on how we use land. Meanwhile, on a separate channel, every country is committed through the Convention on Biological Diversity to set aside, our current target is 30% of our land area set aside by 2030 as protected areas to conserve biodiversity. Those are enshrined strategically in documents that each country submits to the UN system that are called NBSAPs, if you hadn't had enough alphabet soup today. National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plans, completely divorced from the NDCs in terms of what the national commitment to the use of land is going to be. Meanwhile, none of those processes are really talking all that much to the Minister of Agriculture and to the forest manager. What's my point on this? That there's no coherent, centralized strategic making process in government for how we're going to use our land moving forward. And this is not a Mexican problem. This is every country in the world. We're just completely flying blind in terms of how we plan to use our land over the next few decades to meet these goals. So what we've tried to do is actually create the tools to help governments do this. And this is a really hard problem. Because let's say that you want to model increasing in, let's just use Mexico as an example, protected areas by 5%. First problem, where do you put it? Where do you put these protected areas? There's a benefit and a cost, and that varies spatially depending on where you're going to put these, right? So from a biodiversity point of view, or from an ecosystem service point of view, like clean water production, or from a carbon sequestration point of view, there are different benefits in different parts of the country depending on where you put the protected area. And then there's the opportunity cost of what that land could have been used for if it were not protected and instead were put to some productive use like agriculture or forestry or urbanization expansion, for example. So where you do this matters tremendously. And then once you do it, obviously, we live in interconnected markets. So if Mexico voluntarily chooses to produce less of some crop because it wants to protect the land where that crop is produced, well, that changes Mexico's exports. Changing Mexico's exports changes global prices in that crop. Changing the global price in that crop means that some Nigerian farmer maybe has an incentive to produce more of that crop and deforest more of Nigeria in order to produce that. So we're all embedded inside global markets for food and agricultural products that make all of this extraordinarily difficult to think about. So I just want to embed us in how important this problem is from the well-being not only of people, Think about food security, think about malnutrition in developing countries when food prices are very high. We see it. We're seeing it now with El Nino beginning. There's likely to be an increase in child malnutrition over the next few months. We see that every time there's an El Nino. So food production matters. We need forestry products. We need livestock products. I should say at the same time that meeting goals in human cardiovascular health means we need to change diets globally in terms of reducing the amount of animal products that we consume, especially in countries like the United States. If the US were to reduce animal product consumption by, say, 50% to improve diabetes and cardiovascular health among the American population, guess what would happen to food prices all over the world as the US begins dumping massive amounts of animal products abroad? Right? How would that change Mexico's decision-making process in terms of investments in environmental policy in its land and food markets and its agriculture? So we're all interconnected. This is really a very, very tough problem. And we can't even begin to talk about it until we can measure what is our land, right? Do I put a protected area here? Well, what is being grown now? And if it's not being put to a productive use, what is the natural land cover? How rich is its biodiversity? How much carbon is its soil sequestering, which is a huge question everywhere in the world. We often think of it as rounding error on climate change mitigation calculations, but it's actually very, very large, and we have no idea on first order how much carbon our soils can sequester over the next few decades. So I paint a picture of what is analytically very, very challenging. And when a government makes an investment like this, it can help, and I'm referring to investing in data products like the ones that Rodolfo just described, it can help illuminate and unlock some of the difficult parts of these conversations. When you're thinking about how do we think about forestry, whether it's forestry expansion or reforestation decisions that governments are making, or how do we think about trying to reduce agricultural expansion and what that does to food security, or how do we think about where to put our protected areas? These are really first order questions. How much do we care about urban expansion? A question that's very salient here in San Diego because of wildfire risk and all the other things. How much urban expansion are we going to allow to reduce housing costs and all? These are deeply spatial problems where sometimes what's sitting on the other side of a ledger is something we haven't even measured yet. And so whether you care any of these different things that I'm talking about, environmental protection, climate change, food security, planning for a growing human population by mid-century that needs housing and needs transportation infrastructure, everything happens on the same land. And it's embedded inside a global marketplace for agricultural commodities that really impact people's incentives for how they want to expand or contract the margins of productive land. So this is really, really, really important work. And it's not something that's of interest only to ecologists who get tickled by how many herbs might grow in a particular corner of Mexico. That's important. But from a public policy point of view, from a person who is not, right, I'm not a botanist. I don't get excited by the herb itself, but I understand that this product is feeding into a library that helps us define and quantify how different decisions over land use might affect us in broad agendas like the climate change agenda, like the Convention on Biodiversity agenda, like the food security agenda, that all of these things imply some very, very difficult decisions for government that can only be made well if we're well informed with data sets like this one. So this was pretty phenomenal to listen to, and I congratulate INEGI again on making all of these products. I guess I'll let myself ask the first question, because that's... Okay, I'm happy to do that, and then to immediately abuse my power and ask the first question. As you were presenting, the fact that you have so many site samples, you mentioned the herb collection, but you have people all over the country documenting what they're seeing. It immediately calls for an artificial intelligence, or I would call it more a machine learning type approach to classification. And then you gave the example of the neural net approach. I was hoping you could unpack that a little bit more. So exactly what is it trying to classify? What is the training data that's being used? And are there other approaches like this that could reduce the cost of producing more up-to-date products like this? And finally, what's the validation? You know, how strategy? How well is it performing?
Yes. It's open. Okay. No. Thank you. Yes, we started 3 years ago with the use of machine learning, and then got into neural networks and artificial intelligence. As I mentioned, what we did at the very beginning was these 144 tiles in which we divided the whole country, 150 kilometers by side. And then we nested all the images and corrected and nested all the images of, in this case, Landsat. Every single pixel of the Landsat has 30 times 30 meters. That is the smallest part, in this case, of the image. So once we arrange all the images into those tiles, we were pretty sure that every single time you see in one point in the territory, you can have the whole set of images we have from that point, that small square of 30 times 30. Well, now, artificial intelligence has helped us even to understand the way we work, because if you don't set the correct aspects on the algorithms, it won't get to the answer. So the way we previously have made these kind of maps is by setting several things. One of them is the specialists, the technicians, using satellite images have the instruction that everything that goes less than 10 hectares, it is not visible. So we call that the area mínima cartografiable, the minimum cartographic area. Less than 10 hectares, it does not exist for the technician. So they cover roughly whatever the spot of one kind of vegetation they see. But the way they do it is by watching the whole scene, so they can see what is going here, but also close to this. And there are some relationships between different types of vegetation that you can say, okay, if I see pines here, it is very common that I can see oaks here. They are close. When we changed into the use of artificial intelligence, we asked the technicians, I don't care what you see around this point. You have to focus on this point and tell me what is in that small square of 30 kilometers. And that became something almost impossible because humans scan the whole in order to decide what you are watching in a small point, but you need the context. So this is the first thing we faced. Then every single point of them received the attributes that we were able to provide, as the climate, as the rain, as the altitude, also what the face it is at that point. I mean, the point is facing to north, south, east, or west, and then the latitude, because it also changes the type of vegetation you can have. At the end, we've been training with more than 250,000 points, and using from several other institutions as the Comisión Nacional Forestal, the National Forestry Commission, who gave us also access to their points in which they repeat every 5 years, and they go, so we were able also to use them. And at the end, the whole process, in terms of the algorithms, stopped the the sequences of calculations when they got in a curve, they got horizontal. And then we've been having, in general, results, inside results. I mean, the model result of around 55, 56% of accuracy, thematic accuracy. Nowadays, on the rest of this year, we are planning to go out, so we can check through a field sampling if what will be the correct accuracy. Yes. So this is more or less what we are.
You're predicting the 58 categories or so.
Yes, let's say it that way. Yeah. Okay. But we have also observed that the methodology has helped us to identify similar types of vegetation. The problem is the sticker. But it already defines that this is different. This is a vegetation that is different from this one. It may have a mistake by saying this is pines or this is oak, but it already separates the differences of the vegetation, yes.
And are there plans to move beyond Landsat to higher resolution imagery?
That is...
Sentinel is 10 meters.
We've been trying with Sentinel. The problem with Sentinel in the case of Mexico is first the frequency, and second, well, there are three problems. Frequency, second, the southern part of Mexico is a cloudy one, so it has more than 80% of the time we have clouds over there. So we need more, in this case, Landsat give us more passes through the territory so we can have this image. And the third point with in this case with the other, Sentinel, is as it is 10 meters, every pixel of Landsat becomes 9 of
9 Sentinel.
Sentinel, and that makes us even more data. Not for the natural resources, I think 30 times 30 is a good resolution. And from Sentinel, we are using the other part in Sentinel-1 is we're using radar. Mm-hmm. This is good together with Landsat images.
But overall, the prediction accuracy is about 60%, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
More or less.
Interesting. Okay, I could geek out on remote sensing for an hour, so I'll stop. Any questions? Please, is there a microphone going around? Or do you want this one? One was here first and then back there.
Sería en español, está bien. Gracias. Mi pregunta es muy rápida y muy corta. Tenemos una fuente de recursos limitados, ¿no? Y vamos a suponer que las ciudades ya no crecen y que la población se mantiene igual. ¿Cuál sería la perspectiva de vida de una ciudad entonces en este caso de acuerdo con los datos que nos presenta?
Okay. Well, look, we do not do that kind of studies, but I will try to figure out from my personal point of view. Because there is a lot of assumptions that I cannot take into the trade. If the city doesn't grow, it will become older. I mean, the inhabitants will become older, so there will be every time less necessity for food, but a lot of necessity for something, a lot of more services. I was trying to figure out what would happen with a city in those conditions, but it looks like, to me, like it was isolated and going down in terms of civilization. You know, it's well, one generation becomes like 30 years, so maybe in a couple of them, if you don't have any inhabitants, no more growing, no more young children, 2 generations, you're out, I guess. I don't know. Someone has more experience in this kind of things. I'm just figuring out.
Was your question if the population stops growing?
It maintains. Not growing.
Yeah, so if growth rate is 0.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have reposition. Well, as long as the sources of products, food, energy are present. But that's the point. When we speak about erosion or any other phenomena that we attribute to the humankind, that's when I got into the, okay, let's see ourselves as part of the ecosystem. You know, let me take the example of the hurricane of last week, or hurricane in Acapulco. Even before the human got to this land, maybe with dinosaurs, I'm pretty sure there were already hurricanes, and the hurricanes also erode, also makes the sliding of the hills. It's very difficult because it has to do with the way we are managing our resources, not necessarily the rate in which we are growing. It has to do on how we do it now, how we are coming back to different types of agriculture, more taking care more of the soil and the resources. Because if you think on this, as some Argentinian singer said, we are made from the same atoms as Platoon and Christ and any other. We are just recycling the elements. So in the recycling process, we as humans and as animals are using those elements temporarily, but then they will go back to the nature in order to be used for the plants and so on. So it would be like a closed cycle. I don't have an answer about how many years will that supposed city stay alive as a community. I'm not sure. I don't know if you have something.
I'm still trying to figure out what the question is that you're trying to ask. Because there are a lot of things going on. Even if the population stops moving, we have a lot of things like baked-in climate changes that's going to happen that will change agricultural production, that will change agricultural yields, just because as the climate begins to change, where we grow our crops and what we can grow and how efficiently we can grow is going to change in space, whether we like it or not. That's already built into the system. At the same time, if you look historically, there's a technological trajectory that we take. So humans get better at what they do. And so even if you freeze the population, it's not that everything we'll do will be exactly the same. Things are likely to change over time because we innovate and there will be new technologies. And so I'm not exactly sure where your question was going. I think 100 years from now, even beyond an overpopulation, if you want to throw that out of the equation, there are still challenges to be faced as we, A, figure out how to mitigate extreme climate change, B, adapt to the climate change that is going to happen anyway because we've already baked it into the system, and C, continue our trajectory of technological and other kinds of innovations that we're going to do because that's what human beings do. So it's not a static, it will never be a static picture.
Mónica López, Dean of the Graduate School of Business, Cetis University. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was impressive, the algorithms and all the views from geolocation. No? I have been using the INEGI dataset for many research, and I would like two questions. One, if we have information about agriculture, I mean the Valle de Mexicali or Ensenada, San Quintín, where we can map all the fields, and if that fields have what kind of crops. This is one question. And the second, if we have now a better relationship between the economical data of Censos Económicos and agriculture. It's like always we can't find the agricultural data in the economic databases, and that would be a good idea doing through the localization in maps, no?
Well, first of all, we do not set due to the scale we work 1 to 250,000, and taking into account that a small piece of land less than 10 hectares will not be shown currently. The answer is no, we do not have that kind of data, in this case in Mexicali. But there is also SADER, the Secretary of Agriculture and Rural Development, who are officially in charge of setting all these data of, as a level of parcela land. And this is one point. Second point, due to the, we produce the land use and vegetation map every 5 years. So we have to set a base year. The last one is 2018. And we will be using 2023, this year, as the base of the next generation of the map. If we are able to have this new methodology adjusted on time, we may change the product we will publish on that moment. So in the meanwhile, there happened, at least if you are asking, talking about irrigation, irrigated agriculture, you may have at least 2 seasons per year. So every time I go and set an digitalized image of the country with a synthetic image of the whole country across the year, I'm at least watching 2 of them. And I will set that as my data year, base year, to set the next generation. So it is very difficult. Now, what we are pursuing with this change of methodology by inserting these kind of tools? Well, I would love to have every 3 years the new maps with that scale, 1 to 50,000. But maybe if we, I haven't talked with my boss about it, but if we were able to set every 3 years, I would say that we will also be able to provide the government with at least 2 studies during the 6-year period, official period of the presidency. So it will be a nice way to say, okay, this is how you receive the country, this is how you go in your managing period. I'm not trying to point anything, but I figure out that will be more useful for taking decisions. At the end, this is our objective. And the final question in terms of the information of the economic, the agricultural census and the official information of the rest of, in this case of SIAP. Well, we have to remember that, well, the census, agricultural census just happened the year before, 2022. We are about to finish with those data, and as in any other case, this is a picture. You go and ask, what do you have right now on your land? What did you produce the previous one, and so on? And you have to take what they say. I produced this, my yield was this, and that's the data, that's all. We have not been able, as INEGI, to make this census every, in a regular basis, but every time we are able to do it because of the budget, so we go and do it again. So we produce those data, and these data help them also to set their own, because they are in charge of taking the data every single year, every single cycle. That's why maybe there are differences.
Hi, I'm Roberto. I'm originally from Tijuana. I did my bachelor's at Colmex, and now I'm doing my master's here at GPS. And thank you for this collaboration between INEGI and UC San Diego. And I have two questions for you. The first one is, are there any collaborative efforts between INEGI and international organizations or other countries in this topic of environmental mapping and data sharing? And my other question is, looking to the future, what are some of the long-term objectives of INEGI's environmental mapping initiatives? Thank you.
Well, first question is yes, we collaborate. As I showed you, we are part of the NALCMS, North American Land Cover Monitoring System. And in fact, in next January, we will have a meeting over there at Aguascalientes with colleagues from USA and Canada. And we all try to map what is going on with vegetation, mainly across the subcontinent. And also collaborate with some other agencies, as in the case of Brazil, Colombia, and some others in Central America, and also with our colleagues in Europe. What is what we are expecting to go? Well, I would really like, Doctora Marquez, I would really like to set this as the new way of generate natural resources maps. But believe me, it is not as easy as using ChatGPT. It is not. You do really have to go deep into what the algorithms and the logical processes of the mind and how to make those into equations. So the product or the model gives you the best. But if we happens to succeed with, at least in my case, I say 70% of accuracy, which is a lot in biological, I mean, for me it's good in biological phenomena. 70% is good. Otherwise we will be, all of us, the equals, and we are not. So 70%, I put it as a goal. If we set that, and then if we are able to go deeper into these algorithms, I would like to set them all this knowledge into the rest of the maps, geological, hydrological, and climate for sure also. This is what I want.
Thank you. Perhaps just to complement, that's true, we haven't had the economic censuses and the agricultural censuses. The reason being that the last census was in 2007. So this is in part because it's a very expensive census. Meanwhile, we conducted surveys, agricultural surveys, huge agricultural surveys. And finally, we have the results. They will be presented on November 21st. I'll be sure to send you the presentation. It's a lot of expectation on the agricultural census after 15 years of not having the census. And we're conducting the economic censuses next year. So we will have, we are very lucky to have two agricultural census and economic census very close together. So we really see the changes over time. Fortunately for INEGI, we have conducted the economic censuses every 5 years since 1930. So we have this very long series of economic censuses, and that's why our system of national accounts are so powerful, because of the economic censuses. It's not the case in the agricultural census, but we're trying to do our best. And however, I think the agricultural census is really important because of climate change. So we really have to have the money every 5 years to get the agricultural census. So I'm already lobbying with lawmakers to have the resources. But also, what Rodolfo was saying, it's all these new methods are important, not only because it allows us to get more timely information, but also because it saves us money to get more information on the same vein. So it's really important. Thank you.
Someone else? Okay.
This might be, Graciela, beyond the scope of this conference today. I understand that, for example, sometimes the World Bank helps you, but it helps you with methodologies, or it helps you with some resources to surveys. What I'm trying to get here is, I mean, I believe that almost 100% of INEGI's budget comes from the federal, from Congress. No, if you could give us a sense of what.
The thing with the resources out of the federal budget is that we have to guarantee continuity. So if I get money for one survey, 1 year, that's fine. I'll take it, happy. But I need to guarantee that that survey will be conducted in 3 years' time, in 6 years' time. So I have to guarantee continuity. And again, I told you, we're very expensive. Satellite images, we spent 60 million pesos on the images that this Mr. Rodolfo is using and asking for more and more. So it's 60 million out of my budget every year, no matter what. And it's 57 minutes of satellites, only 57. So, and everything is like that. The ENIG, the Encuesta Nacional de Ingresos y Gastos, Income and Expense Survey, 500 million. The agricultural censuses, 2,800 million pesos. 2,800 million pesos. The economic censuses, roughly 4,000 million. So it's very expensive, but it's worth. The thing is that once you have, so I have a meeting with the World Bank a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Oh, we have 4 projects." Oh, that's fine. But so they can provide financing for very short period of time. So it's better to depend on what to secure funding for every 5 years, every 10 years, every 3 years, and so on and so forth. And the other projects is either for pilot projects that allow us to imagine, or experimental statistics, that it's proving a new method, proving a new methodology, and then trying to find the resources. But we have more demands now than 10 years ago. So that's why artificial intelligence, big data is very good news for us. But at the same time, we have to secure and to protect information. So we spend tons of money on cybersecurity. I cannot cut expenses on cybersecurity. I cannot expense processing the data. So we have to decide whether going to the cloud or going to physical servers. And so everything implies money, a lot of money. Sorry for the bad news.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for your conference. My name is Hector. I'm a student here, a graduate student for MPP, a Master in Public Policy. And I know the important it's data for us. So my question is regarding the question over there. It's he made it a good question. I mean, I'm just still thinking about what he tried to say and try to expand more the question. Right now, what is the land for crop in Mexico? What is the percentage used for crops in Mexico? And also the use of artificial intelligence. You said you are using for predicting, you know, how the land it's using for. But right now, artificial intelligence is learning how use this data. But how much the INEGI is projecting in their budget to invest in artificial intelligence? Because certainly this is going to decrease the cost in many issues, right?
Nowadays we've been investing with time. People, it is not me, but technicians we have, having invested at least 2 or 3 years by preparing themselves to understand how to apply artificial intelligence in this area, these vegetation types. So from that point of view, it is we have not yet expend money on it, but in the tools of, in this case, the big computers we are using, but it took us mainly time for the technicians to be formed by web courses and so on. So as the doctor said, we are nowadays using it as an experimental process. And if we set our gut to have good results, then we may implant it. In that moment, we may figure out if we need to invest more in terms of I don't know, cloud computing, or as she said, or local servers. So I think it has we have already invested a lot of time, 2 or 3 years of 2 or 3 persons, 4 in fact. But this is taking us to good results, because we cannot buy this. There is no other country in the world that is making this, because there is no other country the same as ours in terms of the vegetation we have. So we have to use the knowledge we have on the land to train the algorithm. So you cannot buy that. But I'm sure, as you say, that once this evolves, and if we are able also to share with the rest of the world, this may become easier every time. It is still very difficult, because even technicians that have more than 30 years with trained eyes commit a lot of mistakes. They may be tired, they were not on the mood or whatever, but it happens. I mean, that's why I say 70% for me is a lot, because we may be producing these maps maybe on the same rate of our accuracy, but we have not measured in the past. And this is another thing that we are now using. We are using ISOs, international standards from ISO, I mean, to track quality through the process and to test quality of the product. So it's a big change, and it's demanding us a lot of time. I don't remember the first part of your question, sorry. Okay, well, sorry, I don't have that data in mind, because it is not part of it, but maybe we've been, we may be using a lot, around 40–50% of the land. Mexico is a very mountainous country, and maybe you don't keep it in mind, but we're not the best agricultural producers due to this kind of territory we have. We have a lot of land in the middle part of the Mexico, in the northern part, but it's an arid or semi-arid zone, no water. The best zones with economical product are coastal zone of Sinaloa, Jalisco, Tamaulipas, and central part across Guanajuato. So maybe there are several others with different conditions for sure, but we're not. I mean, it is very difficult for Mexico to produce the same quantity or the same yield of corn as you have here in the Corn Belt. So, impossible.
¿Otra persona alguna pregunta?
For the latest, I was trying to look, but yeah, no. I mean, we cannot reveal information that is not is already published. So wait until November 21st, a couple of weeks from now, and you'll have very, very detailed information on the proportion of land in Mexico that is being cultivated. I now found the number of plots, but that doesn't approximate, and it's over 8 million plots being cultivated, but in very, very different sizes. So actually what we found is that we were expecting much more, and it was cultivated. What we found is that some of the plots are being left by producers, either because of the age of the families, I mean the population age, and so they no longer produced, they moved to the cities, or they are abandoned because of migration or because of violence. So these are the three main drivers of plots not being cultivated in Mexico. On the other hand, there has been a huge transformation from what we call protected agriculture, I mean greenhouses in central part of Mexico, and a concentration of land. This is what we already know, but on November 31st, you will have very, very detailed information.
Okay. Anyone else? Give me a minute.
The number I have in my head is 17%, if I remember correctly.
Hello.
Just crops, cropland, not livestock.
Hi. Thank you so much for this conference. My name is Manuel. I'm a student here at GPS. And you were talking about the different regions in Mexico and the north being very deserted and arid. And I'm thinking, how feasible is it to have a project to bring water into the region? You know, I can think of some exceptions like Mexicali being a very agricultural zone and the Comarca Lagunera, but obviously these are exceptions, and the rest of the north of Mexico in general is very deserted. Is it feasible to have some sort of infrastructure project to bring water into the region? And then, on a sort of tangent but related, lithium discovery has been a very significant part of the north of Mexico. So what role would that play regarding that aspect? Or would you say that maybe it wouldn't be worth it to have these projects and instead focus on mineral finding and mining and these sorts of projects? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Look, more than 70% of the water we use as public water for human consumption and also for irrigating comes from groundwater in Mexico. So this is point number one. And once you talk about the agriculture processes in Mexicali, both in Mexicali and in La Laguna, they all come from wells. And problem with, at least with La Laguna zone, is that they are already extracting heavy metals due to the depletion of the groundwater. Same happens in some other places as, let's say, Aguascalientes, where we come from. Aguascalientes is, let's say, in the starting part of the arid zone of the northern part of Mexico, and we are extracting water with maybe more than 800 meters of depth. And that's a lot. And once we extract water, as I mentioned, the faults become present, and then we have another type of problems. And in the same time, in that region, we are a big, it's a big production of milk, as in the La Laguna zone. So we produce milk with a lot of cows, and the cows eat alfalfa. And this is a crop that requires a lot of water, so that's it. We have the perfect storm over there, because we produce cows who eat alfalfa, who needs a lot of water, and the cows also need a lot of water to produce milk. So it's very, very difficult. The wetter part of Mexico is located at the southern part, when in the states of Chiapas and Tabasco, and but you have to go through the central zone of the Sierras, in the so-called Nudo Mixteco, in Oaxaca, Puebla, Guerrero. I mean, it would be a magnificent infrastructure to get water from the south to the northern part of Mexico, but very difficult, very difficult. This middle part of the northern territory of Mexico used to be a sea. That's why we still have over there a lot of ecosystems, small ecosystems, with differentiated characteristics that you cannot find in any other place, as in the case of Coahuila. So you need to go very deep in order to find water. And that is why also it is the part in which we have mines, because the plagues, the geological plagues collapsed. I mean, they made the territory to go up, and this is what we are extracting of gold and silver becomes from the soil of the ocean, of the ancient ocean. I guess for the northern part of Mexico, what we should do is to collect water from rains or make some dams to preserve a little part of it. The problem, once again, is where do I put that infrastructure? How many people do I, or how many towns or settles will I impact? Is it worth to do it here or not? Or make the opposite, as it is very more common here in the United States. Let's settle and then let's put all together. But people will not move just because you put some dam in that zone. So every single aspect or every single decision you take as this, independently of the possibility, the feasibility of doing it, goes up to the quantity of people that I am willing to impact, and to be sure that you will do it. Otherwise, it will be another, as we say in Spanish, elefante blanco, white elephant over there. It's complicated.
On the other hand, INEGI do not take any policy-making decision. I mean, we measure. And over lunch, we were discussing that because someone was telling us, no, but why don't you make some projections? What would happen in 5 years from now? And Rodolfo was insisting that everything that we do is about the past, not the distant past, yesterday. But we do not project anything. And it's good. It's all statistical offices do that. We do not measure to do something else. That something else is up to you guys. It's up to researchers, to policymakers, to businessmen. But our core business is to measure. and to measure with the best possible methods. So that we do concentrate on that. So that's why we have statistics on water. Whether that leads to construction of infrastructure is up to others. But we cannot do both things, because it would be sort of it would be beyond. But by showing off what is available, what data is available, we now know very detailed, we now have very detailed information on, how do you say escurrimientos?
Running.
Yeah, so because I love, every time I visit the local offices of INEGI, they are really, we know where water is in the entire country. So we see all these possibilities, and it's available. And that's why we disseminate this information. But where to build dams, we don't know.
No, it's something about CONAGUA. CONAGUA has to decide. But yes, I was trying to answer from my personal point of view, not in this case, not professional, trying to put some light on what you asked, but no, this is not our job. You're welcome.
¿Alguna persona más que quiera participar?
Hola, la pregunta iba, can you lower the cost of the census and the surveys with the new technologies? I was looking at like 80 to 90% of the Mexican has access to internet in maybe smartphones and computers. So can you like update the methodology or maybe not these big census, but small surveys?
We have already done that. And actually, I encourage you, we will have a count, conteo, in 2025. We tried for the first time in the 2020 census, and we will try it again on 2025. It's called autoenumeración. So you go to the computer and you add all your information. It's already there, but it's too much to say that every Mexican now have. So I mean, we expect to capture a fraction of the census data through computers. The economic census, we have a part of the economic units called priority group, and the priority group is composed of 5% of the total units, and it's responsible for 80%. So 5% of economic units in Mexico is responsible for 80% of the total value produced. So all the economic units in this group will answer the census through internet. And it's because these are very large groups and it's very complex, so they have to ask different departments to provide information. So we already use that, but we're far from having the census completely taken out of the, no? And all our surveys are, not all, but many of our surveys are done by electronic. It's no longer a paper-based questionnaire. It's an electronic questionnaire that takes 8 seconds to get to Aguascalientes server, so that we don't have any cybersecurity problem. So we are trying to keep up, but still, so if we go with the economic censuses, we have to buy 25,000 small tablets for the enumerators. So everything in INEGI is like that. So they have to be manufactured in China, especially for INEGI, with certain characteristics. So we now receive all the tablets. They are in Aguascalientes, and we're preparing them just for the economic censuses. So that's a cheap census, actually. I mean,
And one thing to see over the future that will be interesting is how things like non-response and survey attrition evolve in a world where it becomes more frequent to ask for voluntary responses. That people just say, I don't feel like doing this, or they don't finish it. And that's very different than when you have a human on the door asking you questions. So you'll always have to supplement.
I am very, I think INEGI is welcome in houses. So even if we have to pay for that, but we are everybody knows the beige chaleco, jacket, and the jacket and the backpack. And so that's trust. And that's something that we value a lot. So we have to pay for it. Otherwise, people say, no, I don't feel like. It's like all the surveys you receive in your phone. Just you decided not to. And we don't want to be one of them. We are INEGI, so we have to be present and to have the human interaction. Still important.
Thank you. I want to add something that maybe Graciela is not going to say, but in Mexico, we are always talking about the cost of the things, and the government is telling us that all the things, public things, are very expensive, and we have to cut the budgets. But INEGI has a budget of 15 billions of pesos. It sounds a lot of money, but it's just 30 cents for each 100 of pesos of the federal budget. So it's almost nothing. You have 99, 70 cents for all other things, and you know that the money that you put in INEGI is money that is working, giving us information of very high quality. So I think INEGI is not an expensive institution. It's just 30 cents of each 100 pesos of the federal budget. And also, I think it's necessary. I was working until April in the National Electoral Institute that also does a lot of work in the field. For example, next year that is, we're going to have elections. And it's very important in a country with the characteristics of Mexico, with a lot of social inequality, and a lot of populational dispersion, have people to go to the houses in the rural areas, marginal areas, to do all the work. So I think if it's time to discuss about the budget of INEGI, I think we have enough evidence to defend the INEGI and its costs. Thank you.
Any last question? Excellent. If not, what's next on our agenda? I'm not even sure. We're done for the day. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Rodolfo, it was wonderful, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much for supporting, staying here.